Good morning every day.
Good morning.
What a beautiful, soft, yummy. I'm thinking down, like falling into a down mattress or something. Not that I've ever had that experience, but I can imagine it. Because if you make a down pillow as big as a mattress, then you can imagine falling into a down. Welcome to February.
Yes.
For heavens to Betsy sakes. How did it get to be February? Well, as Deborah has already mentioned, our theme for this month is true love. And my talk title today is Spirit is Love. Because if we don't start there, then none of the rest of it really matters. It's all fiction. Spirit as love is the creative force that activates how trees happen, and a new rose happens, and a new tulip happens, and junipers bloom. And so love is the activating force that is always in motion, even though to us it might seem otherwise. Because what we're looking at is we're looking at human evidence and human conditions. And I'm not saying that's bad, and I'm not saying that's wrong. What I'm saying is that there's more to the picture. And it gets in our way to only be able to see human evidence and human conditions. The human evidence that we're seeing and the human conditions that we're seeing are certainly real. They're actually happening. We aren't making them up. Because if we were making them up, they wouldn't be the way they are. Isn't that right?
Yes.
We'd be making up something much better. Something yummy, something delicious, something beautiful, something joyous, something that is life-sustaining, something that is supportive of all things and all beings. And why is that what we would make up? Because that is what we are. That is what we are. And we forget. We forget that this house that we occupy, called our body, we forget that that's not all there is to us. We forget that the reason that we can imagine things differently and the reason that we can look beyond and ask to see a bigger picture, even though we won't be able to see the whole picture, because nobody can see the whole picture until the picture is ready to be revealed. The only reason we can do that is because of all that we are. Now, we might ask ourselves, if all that I are, who was that? If all that I am is all that? How come? Why is it that just by thinking of, imagining and thinking of and focusing on a different outcome, a more life-sustaining outcome, how come it just doesn't happen if I'm all that? Because if I'm all that, I'm all that. The thing is that all that, that's not what it does. It doesn't just zoom in, because it's already in. It doesn't just show up and go abracadabra, get your act together. It doesn't do that. It doesn't interfere with a disagreement and say, hey, you, clean it up. Respect each other. Don't you know who you are?
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't do that because it is having the argument as an experience that we are deciding to show it. This is how you have a human argument, in case you ever wanted to know. One of our greatest challenges, no matter how long we've been studying this philosophy or any other life-supporting, elevating, life-enhancing teaching, one of our greatest difficulties is realizing that the divine, God, Spirit, the one life, is not a human being.
Yep.
Nor is it a human doing. It does not have a human personality. So when we talk about, as Ernest Holmes does, and as other great teachers have throughout time, in one way or another, as we talk about how this life, whatever we call it, and whatever we honor it as, how it thinks and how it acts, it's challenging, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To not give it a human personality. To not put it in a human context. I wanted to find something in particular in Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind book, which we refer to, those of us who have been in the teaching for a long time, we refer to it as the textbook. Because for a long time in many classes, that was it. It's about this thick. I don't want to scare you. And Ernest had a very interesting way of speaking about stuff. He probably still does. And it wasn't always clear. In fact, in the same paragraph, and this one thing that I was reading yesterday, I thought, how in the world is anybody supposed to make sense of that? Because in the same paragraph, he contradicted himself. How is anybody supposed to make sense of that? Well, we learn to, along the way, not because we found another teacher to explain it. But because the teacher within is always there to show us, to reflect back to us, to guide us to an understanding, whatever the understanding is that we can tap into in that moment. I cannot speak about spirit being love without speaking about our personal experience of what spirit is. And our personal experience of what spirit is depends on where we are. Exactly. Anybody else hear that? Where we are in our awareness, in our own understanding, in our willingness to allow some of what sounds like cockeyed ideas, some of these to maybe be possible. I can't speak of spirit without telling all of us how important it is to acknowledge where you are. Because where you are in this moment, on this day, here with me and all of us together, you are where you are in your understanding, in your willingness, in your realization, in your recognition. You are where you are. I am where I am. And often I've found that people will come to me after a service and they'll say, I had a really hard time understanding what you were saying because not all of it made sense to me. Good for you. Good for you. You're acknowledging where you are. And that's where we all begin. Every day. Brand new. You know, brand new doesn't mean without what we brought to the next moment, to the next day, to the next week. We bring stuff. We bring our previous experience, we bring our previous ideas, we bring whatever has informed us that we decide, consciously or unconsciously, is still of value. And sometimes we bring stuff that really isn't still of value, but there's the unconscious decision that it is. So, for example, we may no longer have reason to be afraid of something. Pick a something.
The dark.
The dark. Great example. We may no longer have reason to be afraid of the dark because we've gotten this far. We've survived all the darks that have happened in between, and we may no longer have reason to feel afraid of the dark, but might we still feel afraid of the dark?
Sure.
Yes. On occasion.
So what? It's okay. Whatever it is that we have brought along to this point, we have brought along for our own reasons. And Sometimes it's just because it's comforting. The old way of seeing something, the old way of feeling about something, the old way of interpreting something is comforting, even though it's limiting. Example, personal story. Happened between Denise and I this morning. So Denise has been thinking about retiring. Don't worry, I'm not. Maybe ever. Anyway, Denise has been thinking about retiring, and actually she's been thinking about both of us retiring, but that's what Denise is thinking about. And so she was doing some exploring to see what her income might be, Social Security, etc., at a certain age. And there are a gazillion ideas. If somebody wrote a book just about thoughts on retiring, holy moly, it would be this thick. Because there are so many different ideas about retirement. There are people who still think that retirement is their gateway to freedom. That in order to really feel free and to really have the capacity to do as they choose and to choose differently and to have fun, they have to retire. Really? Well, it's somebody's thought, and it's where someone is in their thinking. Now, where this really gets interesting is if that's where they are in their thinking, that's the truth for them. That is the truth for them. If, on the other hand, like Stephen, one believes that you can have fun every day just 'cause, you don't need permission, you don't need to be released from anything, you can just have fun 'cause, then guess what? That's the truth for Stephen. Is one truth better than the other? Now this is where things get a little sticky. Is one truth better than the other?
No.
Well, I hear a couple of little tiny no's.
No.
They probably would have been a little louder if you weren't thinking that that's what I thought or hoped someone would say. No, it's not more true. The thing is, if whatever it is that we believe, if whatever it is are in terms of our thoughts and how things have gone so far in our life, if there's anything that we have particular attachment to, that attachment to the old idea, to the old belief, to the old way of being, to the old way of choosing, will show up again and again and again for us to re-experience. It usually wears a different outfit, so it's not always obvious, but it shows up it's like putting a song on repeat. It is a great significance that, and it's probably, of all of the invitations, of all of the encouragement that we receive in this experience of being a spiritual being, living as a spiritual being in a human experience, when we can realize from wherever we are, in whatever way we can, that the life that lives in us, as us, and through us, and all of creation as we know it, and all of creation that has ever been, and all of creation that will ever be, is love. And that we are loved unconditionally just the way we are. There is nothing that is waiting for us to become something else.
Mm-hmm.
God isn't standing around, tapping its foot, going, come on, let's get this together. No, we are loved unconditionally, just the way we are, and the way we are not. There's no judgment. Only human beings judge. There's no judgment. There's no condition that can change that. So then what's the advantage to our growing in our realization of that love? I've got to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to talk about next week, because it's a very important piece of all of this. So, love works one way. It always works in a way that serves us to the degree that we can receive. It always works through us to the degree that we can receive. And that is part of the natural law of the flow of things. And love works through law, not around law, not over law, not under law. It works through the law. And the law has no attachment to what it is that we ask for.
Mm-hmm.
It just is compelled by the love that is constantly working through it. It is compelled to fulfill what we are requesting.
Mm-hmm.
Think you'll come back next week? And so it is.
And so